It's that time, guys, where we've had the Chinese Grand Prix and I go through and rate each and every one of the drivers and how they've got on over the whole weekend. And this one is a bit of a difficult one because we've had some drivers do fantastically well in the sprint, Lewis Hamilton, not so great in the race, Lewis Hamilton. And so it's, gets a bit tricky with some of the ratings, but don't shoot me if you don't like some of them. But let's get straight to it. We always start with Numero Uno, first place, Max Verstappen. And P1 in the race, P1 in the sprint. The only surprise was really how badly he was in the sprint qualifying session, wasn't he? When the rain came down, and normally he's absolutely fantastic in them conditions, isn't he? He was nowhere, wasn't he? And that was the big surprise, and that was the only letdown of his whole weekend. In the sprint, though, he put it right. He was so much faster than everybody else in race conditions. I mean, there was not a single lap, I think, over the sprint race as a stat that Karun put up on Twitter that over the whole sprint race, or the whole race distance, and no driver on any single lap was faster than him from second, third or fourth places, and that just shows the absolute dominance of his performance there. It was brilliant, incredible, consistent. I mean, you run out of superlatives for this guy because he's just doing it time and time again. I was going to say a 10 out of 10, but because of that poor qualifying, I think 9.5, just because I've just given him 10 every weekend, don't I? So just to be different, a 9.5 just for one bad sprint qualifying. Otherwise, he was tremendous, wasn't he? And then second place, the man, Lando Norris. He was... this was big overall, a brilliant weekend. Let's just get that one out of the way. Sprint qualifying on pole, it was a tremendous lap, 1.5 seconds faster than everybody else. The sprint race, his turn 1 incident was not great, let's be honest. There's no two ways about that. He probably should have seen better, and then instead of getting binned and down to 6th place, lived to fight another day in 2nd. And given how good that car was, could he have held Verstappen up for at least 16 of the 19 laps or something, It's a shame that we missed out on that part. But in race day, yes, McLaren got a little bit lucky with the way the VSC just got dragged on a little bit longer, because they nearly missed that slot, didn't they? And that would have cost Lando dearly, and second place would have been a bit more difficult then, I think. But he just held on really, really well. He was fast, he kept the tyres in check, and overall there's nothing you can say. Despite that little small mistake at turn 1 on sprint day, I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10 because I just thought he was brilliant. Absolutely fantastic job from him. And then comes Sergio Perez. He finished in P3 in both the sprint and qualifying, and the sprint and the race day. His qualifying for the race was brilliant, P2, P6 for the sprint qualifying, and he struggled as well. But if you compare Perez's performance to last year, I think this is a really good result for him. But if you look how competitive that car was, especially in the hands of Max Verstappen, where he absolutely wiped the floor with everyone, Perez should really be coming home in second place here this weekend. It should be a Red Bull 1-2. And so it's going to sound really harsh, but he should have done better, and he should have comfortably in second place. Yes, he lost out to Lando Norris behind the safety car, but they were bunched up, and he should have really been able to get past the Ferrari, who weren't great this weekend, and really been hassling Lando Norris, to say the least, or at least a minimum. But Lando kept him comfortably. He dropped him as well, actually, towards the end of the race by about 5-6 seconds in the end, wasn't it? So I'm going to give a 7 out of 10, and that might sound harsh to some, but I think reality is that car is just so dominant that Perez should be doing better. And in 4th place, Charles Leclerc. He was 4th in the sprint, 4th in the race. It was their qualifying which was really horrible, wasn't it? And they weren't fantastic on race day either. Charles Leclerc saying he was surprised actually how bad they were on the hard tyres. And so was I, because I had them down to being the fight and winning probably the sprint as well. I had, if you look at my predictions for this weekend for them, so that went horribly wrong. But that was the shame really. Decent race pace, but poor qualifying, and that's actually a bit big swing, isn't it, on this car? Because last year they were fantastic on a single lap, but race day they just ate the tyres, and this year we've seen a swing on that, and we've not really seen them push for pole. And I'm given for a 7 out of 10 for Charles Leclerc for this weekend. It got really feisty with him and Carlos Sainz though, and that was the brilliant battle, let's be fair. Like, them two in the sprint was tremendous, and them two in the race in turn one was, yeah, it looked like they were really going at each other. It seems like it got a bit personal and spicy for the first time of the season this weekend, didn't it? Next up, Carlos Sainz, a 5th place finish for him in the race, and a 5th place in the sprint as well. He just followed home his teammate, and he'll be a little bit disappointed with that. He was racing really hard in the sprint. He was harder on his tyres than Charles Leclerc, wasn't he? And then also on race day, he got binned at turn 1, and that cost him. He dropped a couple of places there, and then he was fighting from there on, trying to come through the field. But it was a good battle. Charles Leclerc got the better of him this weekend, and you could see Carlos Sainz sort of fighting more for himself really this weekend, rather than at times he sort of played the team game. But as we saw last year in Monza, them two were absolutely fantastic fighting, so I kind of quite like it, so I'd rather they just keep doing it. I'm going to go for a 6 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz this weekend because he got beaten by his teammate. 6th place, George Russell. Georgie boy, he finished in 6th in the race, P8 in sprint race. Poor qualifying in for the sprint, started 11th, and on the race he started 8th, so it was much better when it came to race day, George was, but the sprint was poor for him, didn't it? He did well to manage the pace on the softs, but I thought he might do better, especially off the start, but he just wasn't really to be, was it? It was a horrible weekend overall for Mercedes, actually, because they were never really in the hunt for a fight or a battle for anything solid or anything on the hunt, really. They were comfortably the 4th fastest car, and by a bit of a distance to the Ferraris, weren't they? They were quite far behind, and that'll be the big concern for them, because they've dropped behind McLaren, Ferrari, and they're way up behind the Red Bulls at the moment, aren't they? But yeah, probably 6 was the best that they could do. I'm going to go for a 6 out of 10 for George Russell for this weekend. And then Fernando Alonso, the lone attack man from Aston Martin, isn't he? He's the man of the moment there. A P7 finish. His qualifyings were brilliant, weren't they? Qualified 3rd in both for the sprint qualifying and for the race. A DNF in the sprint in the end with that battle, which was brilliant, by the way, with him, Sainz and Perez. It's a shame that he had to retire from that one. He got 3 penalty points as well. It was a bit harsh on him, I think, really. But yeah, he outdid the car in qualifying. He was tremendous, wasn't he? Race conditions though, that car really struggled, and it was more looking back than looking forward for Aston Martin. The big mistake was the strategy, really, because it looked like he was on for 5th, 6th place. They went for the softs, which was never going to make it to the end. I'm surprised. They maybe were reluctant to go on the hards, and they probably should have considered mediums, because we knew that they would make it to the end. So yeah, bit of a blunder on the strategy, I think, on that one, but he did a solid job. Save of the day as well when he was behind Hamilton. Fantastic job from him there. I'm going to go for a 7 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso, because I thought he was tremendous. Oscar Piastri, he finished 8th in the race, started 5th, finished 7th in the sprint, started 7th, and he had some damage in the race, didn't he? And that's what really dropped him back, I think, so we'll give him some benefit of the doubt. He got that bit of a bump from the Stroll Ricciardo pile up a bit, wasn't it, when Stroll went just right off Daniel Ricciardo, and yeah, he was disappointing there towards the end. I think his tyre management again was the big problem, especially in the sprint and also in race day, and he needs to really get on top of that to try and take the battle to Lando Norris, because really that's who he's fighting, isn't he? I think he should have done better overall. A bit harsh, but I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10 because I think he should have done better this weekend. 9th place, Lewis Hamilton. I mean, he was, a weekend of 2 halves, wasn't he? Absolutely brilliant in the sprint qualifying and sprint. race. P2, I think he really outdid that car, especially in the sprint race, didn't he? Especially considering how bad he was in the race, and his teammate was as well. He had the better of George Russell, I think, overall this weekend, and it just didn't show in the race day, does it? Because Q1 qualifying was horrendous. To start P18 was well out of sorts for Lewis Hamilton, and I think he was massively disappointed with that. He did well, a good recovery to P9. I think that was a good job. It's probably the best he could have hoped for in that car, and I think overall it was hard to judge Lewis Hamilton for this weekend, but I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10, and that's purely down to a P2 in the sprint race, which I thought was phenomenal from him, really. That was really outdoing the car. Nico Hulkenberg next up. He finished 10th, the last point position for him. A fantastic job in the race. He qualified well, but 9th in the race and 13th for the sprint, but then fell way down, didn't he? He finished P19 in the sprint in the end, so not a great result. It was a horrible sprint and then a really good race, so another one with two really mixed races to judge on, really. So a hard one, but I think that's a really good job, really good race for him to come back and get some points for the Haas team. I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10 for Nico Hulkenberg, because I thought that was a really good race from him to pick up some points there. Well done, Nico Hulkenberg. And then 11th place, Esteban Ocon, Alpine's best performance of the season. Shame he was just 2 seconds of points at the end, wasn't he, of the race. His sprint wasn't great at all. P14 finish, started 17th. But yeah, they can probably be happy. They've got some cause for optimism and hope they can move and fight up the field, but still no points for them yet. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10 because that car is a bit of a dog, and to get that 11th place is... actually he's done really well there. Alex Albon in 12th place. He started 14th, 17th place finish in the sprint. He started 18th. Another horrible sprint race and qualifying for him. They just didn't get their car going in the rain. In the race though, it was better, wasn't it? But they were never really in the hunt for any points for this weekend. I think they'll just go home happy that they've managed to take both cars home without any damage this weekend, and they can just hope for and need some upgrades to fight for some points, don't they, that Williams team, and hopefully that will come soon. I've gone for a 6 out of 10 for Alex Albon for this weekend. Next up, Pierre Gazley, who finished in 13th place. He started 15th for the race, and in the sprint he finished 15th, started 16th. He's beaten by his teammate all weekend, wasn't he, really? Not in the fight for any points, and I guess he'll just be disappointed because really his battle is just with Esteban Ocon this weekend, and really that's, just be hoping for some progress. P13, better but not good enough. I'm going to go for a 5 out of 10 for Pierre Gasly. Zhou Guanyu, the home boy, finished in 14th place, didn't he? His home race. It was really nice to see that he got that little moment at the end. I think that's purely down to Formula 1 coming back to China after 5 years. A full house at China, and it was actually really well supported, that race, wasn't it? And I think the F1 sort of saw that, let Zhou have his moment. And will it be his last Chinese Grand Prix? Who knows? In terms of I think it was not a great race. The sprint was brilliant, wasn't it? Let's be honest. A 9th place and 10th place start for him was absolutely fantastic. He couldn't got any better start for his home race. But actually, when it came to race day, it was disappointing, wasn't it, for the Sauber team? And wonder if they just went in the wrong direction, set up for the race day after what they went through in the sprint. So I think he'll be disappointed with the race, but I think he can be happy with the sprint day. And I've gone for an 8 out of 10, and that's purely down to the sprint, to be honest, for Zhou Guanyu. Next up, 15th place for Lance Stroll. He started 11th in the sprint. He finished 14th. He started qualifying 15th. Was this his worst performance ever in an Aston Martin? I'll leave that for you guys to answer out there, because for me, I think it was horrendous, wasn't it? There was no point at any point in this weekend was this good for him. it was a shocking incident to just write Daniel Ricciardo off, and then his attitude after was just even worse, wasn't it? The spoiled brat billionaire's kid. Just, yeah, didn't go down well at all. It was not nice to see that kind of attitude. He blamed Daniel Ricciardo for effectively him not looking at it, and when we look at the onboard footage, he's clearly looking at the apex and not concentrating on what's going on ahead of him, and it was purely down to him and his fault. He got a 10-second penalty for it, but I think I've seen others say it should be worse, and I can see why they should have something to carry on over to the next race, because his race was effectively over, wasn't it? It was never in the fight for anything. So to give him 10, I mean, could have given him a pit stop and 10-second go through the pit lane, and it still wouldn't have made any difference to him this weekend. So in that sense, I can see where that will lie, but it's hard. I think it was probably the only penalty worth giving, wasn't it? But yeah, that's the only downside. It was a horrible weekend for him. And will Papa Stroll finally see and realise his son is just not good enough, and yeah, give him the cold hard truth and replace it? Because actually, can Aston Martin really afford to carry on with him for much longer in the championship? The championship, in the Constructors' Championship, they're losing out because they've got one man getting you some points and you've got the other one doing nothing. And to fight with one arm behind your back, it's a very tight championship battle. They are in there with Mercedes, you know, McLaren, Ferrari, really, and so they kind of want both guys to be picking up points, and really at the moment that's not happening for him. It's a 1 out of 10 for Lance Stroll, no surprise there. It's probably the worst rating I've given anyone, and it was a horrible weekend for him. Kevin Magnuson then, 16th place. He started 17th for the race. He finished 10th actually in sprint, so he had another good sprint, started 12th. Another mixed weekend, a good sprint and a horrible race. He was, poor in the race actually. Got that 10-second penalty for taking out Yuki Tsunoda, and then he gave us that fantastic battle with him and Stroll for 16th place, wasn't it? It was brilliant to see, but I'm going to go for a 5 out of 10, and that's purely just down to the sprint, to be honest, because his race was horrible. And the 17th place finish for Logan Sargent, the last of the finishers. He was last in qualifying for both the race and the sprint. His sprint, he didn't finish last, effectively was P18, but another really underwhelming performance from him this weekend. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. He in the Lance Stroll boat, is he good enough? He's not really performed yet, has he? There's not been that performance where you thought, yeah, this boy's got it. But he's heading off to Miami, a home race for him in the US, and let's hope there's something that he can show to try and keep that seat, because at the moment it looks like it's just slipping away from him there. I'm going to go for a 4 out of 10 for Logan Sargent. And then to the DNFs, it was Daniel Ricciardo I'm going with first. He didn't finish we qualified in 12th, didn't finish the race, but for the sprint it was an 11th. It was probably one of his better weekends, wasn't it, Daniel Ricciardo, who comfortably Yuki. But yeah, shame he got taken out by Stroll, because could he have fought with for that 10th place point? Who knows? We'd never really get to find out. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. That's purely down for the sprint. I thought that was good from him. Yuki Tsunoda, another DNF obviously for the race, started 19th. For the sprint, finished 16th, started 19th. It was probably his, he'll just hope he doesn't have another weekend like this ever again in the season. It was horrible considering how good a form he's been on. He just was never got to grips with this track at all. I'm going to go for a 4 out of 10 for Yuki. And finally, Valtteri Bottas. He was brilliant in qualifying for both sessions, wasn't he? Started 10th for the race, 9th for the sprint, finished 12th in the sprint, and yeah, he was on it this weekend really, especially in qualifying. He really shone through most of the sessions, and it was a shame that the car died on him when it did. Could he have been there again for finally picking up some points? They still had the slow pit stops, didn't they, Sauber? So another issue that they still really need to hope they can get on top of. But yeah, in the race he was doing well, but I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10, and that's purely down to just the qualifying performances for this weekend. It was good to see Valtteri on form again, and showing what he's made of in that Sauber. And yeah, there we have it. That's the rating for the Chinese Grand Prix. Watch out for the Miami preview coming, and other videos as and when with the paddock talk. There's obviously the big conversation going out for points to 12th place, isn't there, that we'll have on Thursday. Let's see what the FIA think about that for next season, and I'll give you my thoughts when we've got some news on that. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment as always. See you next time.